Notre Dame checks in at number 10 in the initial CFP rankings, why I believe the committee got it wrong when it comes to the Irish, plus why Notre Dame should blow Florida State off the field on Saturday, and anything less than that should be considered a disappointment. Let's all come right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And today is Wednesday, November 6th, and thanks for making this your first listen of the day. This show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For those of you watching along, remember, like this video and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We have a lot to get into today. Notre Dame came in at number 10 in the first CFP rankings of the 2024 season, and I have plenty of thoughts about that. Plus, I'm going to preview the upcoming matchup between the Irish and the Florida State Seminoles. It's easy to look at the 1-8 record and think, wow, that Florida State team is terrible. Notre Dame should blow them out. But I promise you, when you take an even closer look at Florida State, you will realize their situation is even more dire than you previously thought. But before we get to that, let's talk about the CFP rankings and what it means for Notre Dame's path to the 12-team playoff. Right off the bat, I think that the ranking is too low. I felt like Notre Dame should be 8th. Luke Smith and I talked about this in yesterday's show. I thought there was a chance they'd be at number 7, but the committee has them at number 10. So here's the top 10 for you. Oregon at 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Miami 4, Texas 5, Penn State 6, Tennessee 7, Indiana 8, BYU 9, and Notre Dame at 10. Also of note, Notre Dame has 2 wins over teams ranked in the top 25. Texas A&M came in at number 14, and Louisville cracked the top 25 at 22 following their win on the road against Clemson. You will notice that Notre Dame is the lowest ranked one-loss team in the top 10, and that's the part that doesn't really make much sense to me, because Texas at 5, I won't really argue with that because they do pass the eye test. Their resume isn't all that great, though. Their win over Michigan is okay. The win against Oklahoma is not really that impressive because Oklahoma is terrible. And Texas got dominated by Georgia at home. They did get a nice road win over Vanderbilt. The fact that Vandy did not crack the top 25 in the initial CFP rankings is a bit disgraceful, in my opinion, because I think that's a good football team down there in Nashville. But the real issue I have with these rankings, and specifically the top 10, is having Penn State at 6. Why? What did Penn State do to deserve a 6th rank in the initial CFP rankings? Their best win is over USC in overtime. They also beat Illinois, who just lost back-to-back games. And Notre Dame is a win over the 14th ranked team in the country, who, by the way, is an SEC team on the road. Penn State honestly should have been blown out by Ohio State, if we're being honest. Instead, Will Howard allowed Penn State to score a pick 6 right off the bat, and then he fumbled the ball going into the end zone. I think there is a real case to be made that if Will Howard just did not commit either one of those turnovers, Ohio State wins this game going away. Now, credit to Penn State, right? They made a play on the pick 6. They did force the fumble on the way to the end zone, but they also did not even score an offensive touchdown in what was billed as a game in which if they didn't win now, when would it ever happen? You've heard the stats about James Franklin going up against top 5 teams, and I know that Fox has shown it on the broadcast, like if the 12-team playoff had been around since 2014, Penn State would have been in more than any other team or as much as any other team. And I get that. Like, Penn State is a good program, but they are not an elite team, and I believe that having them at 6 is a little bit too high. I did see that ESPN's strength of schedule metric has Penn State's strength of schedule at like 28th, which is actually the best of the one-loss teams. That is pretty much all I need to know in order to discount that metric entirely, because I do think it's based off the FPI. And if you're a listener or someone who watches this show regularly, you know that the FPI doesn't really make any sense, and anyone who currently works for ESPN or anyone who has worked at ESPN in the past really doesn't understand what it means, and it's not really a good metric to use, but that is what ESPN is using in this case. If the playoffs started today, though, Notre Dame would play at Penn State in the first round in the 10-7 matchup, because even though Purdue is certainly not ranked in the top 25, even though BYU is ranked 9th, they would actually get the 4 seed because they are currently the highest ranked Big 12 team, the highest ranked Power 4 conference over the group of 5. So they would have that 4 seed. Notre Dame would have Penn State on the road in that 10-7 matchup. And honestly, I would love that. I think Notre Dame would absolutely win that game. I did see somewhere on X that A bookie basically made a line for that game and said Penn State would be favored by 3.5. I think that has more to do with the fact that they would be home in this scenario. But hey, if things work out that way, that'd be great. Another one-loss team ahead of Notre Dame that I want to talk about is Tennessee. I'm not surprised they're ranked higher than Notre Dame. They do have a better win than Notre Dame. When you look at the CFP rankings, Tennessee was able to beat Alabama at home. Alabama is ranked number 11 compared to Texas A&M, which is 14. And they also have a much better loss compared to Notre Dame because Tennessee lost on the road to against Arkansas, who is at least a competent SEC team. And as we know, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. And that's really the one thing that's holding them back because for as good as that win is against Texas A&M, even though it's not quite as good now after the Aggies lost to South Carolina, that loss to Northern Illinois is going to be brought up every single week. It is really a stain on the program and the resume specifically, and it's really not going to go away anytime soon. And look, as Notre Dame fans, we just have to eat it. That was a terrible loss. It's undoubtedly the worst loss that any team at the top has taken this year. So that is the way it is. I'm not surprised Indiana and BYU are ahead of Notre Dame. They're undefeated. Even though I think we would probably all agree that Notre Dame would beat either one of those schools on a neutral site, except maybe Indiana. Like, I don't know, man. I am a believer in the Hoosiers and what Kurt Cignetti has going on down there, but I definitely think Notre Dame would be able to beat BYU. BYU does have a nice ranked win over Kansas State, and Indiana just crushes everyone they face. So, as it stands, what is Notre Dame's path to the college football playoff? Well, all they have to do is win out and they're in. That has been the case before the initial rankings came out, but now it's solidified. If Notre Dame finishes 11-1, they are no doubt going to be in the college football playoff. But the real question at this point is, are they going to be able to host a game? I think the 5 seed is probably out of reach unless there is absolute carnage at the top there, which I don't really expect there to be. There is a world, though, where I could see Notre Dame climbing up to the 6 seed, which would be really important because if they do get to that 6 seed, it would set them up with an easier first and potentially second round matchup as well. Because at this point, I would be shocked if the Big Ten and the SEC champion, one combination of either of those two, like they are going to be the 1 and 2 seeds in whatever order. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Oregon, and then you have Georgia right there at number 2. But who knows what's going to happen as the rest of the season plays out. But that also means that the 3 seed most likely is going to go to the ACC champion, which looks like it's going to be Miami. Their schedule the rest of the way is pretty easy. I think they are going to finish undefeated. So depending on what happens down the stretch, Notre Dame could face off against a team like Boise State, SMU, maybe Indiana if they lose to Ohio State in that 6-11 game. And then if they get through that, then they would have the 3 seed, who we think is going to be Miami, in the second round. That's a winnable game. I'm not saying that you can just chuck Notre Dame up into the Final Four by any stretch. No, because they could lose in the first round. But it'd be a lot better than playing a team like Georgia or Oregon in the second round, which is certainly a possibility depending on how things shake out. There's a lot more football to be played. And as I go through all of this, the one thing that kind of sticks in my mind is those initial CFP rankings every single year and how they look so different at the end. But look, they're going to release these rankings. Of course, we're going to talk about it. And if they're going to release rankings, we're going to complain about them as well, because that is basically the entire point of these rankings. And I always get a kick out of people who get like really riled up. Like, I can disagree with the committee and what they picked with Notre Dame here, and I can disagree with some of the other teams that they have and where they're at in their rankings, but like, it doesn't really matter, right? Because there's still so much football left in the month of November and then into December now with conference championships and things like that. Also, Ohio State and Indiana, they're going to play each other. Georgia and Tennessee are going to play each other. If Georgia wins that, I think Tennessee is going to be in a difficult spot, but they could still make it as well. And I feel very confident that one team that nobody expects to lose will probably lose. I just said Miami's probably going to go undefeated. They could definitely lose a game, right? BYU, maybe Indiana trips up outside of Ohio State. So this is how I feel about it today. If I wanted to, we could go around and around and around with all these different resumes and things like that. But that's not what we're here to do today. We're going to react to the initial ones, and I honestly think that the committee does this on purpose for ratings. Not to say that they're just going to put someone in a spot that they have no business being in, but if it's like, you know what, let's generate the conversation a little bit. Let's draw a little bit more eyeballs to the actual rankings released on Tuesday nights. I don't think that hurts them, and it doesn't hurt ESPN either. But that's how I'm feeling today, and that is all I've got on the CFP rankings for this episode. I'm sure we're going to talk about them a lot, and then every Wednesday going forward, I'm going to react to where the CFP has Notre Dame, assuming they continue to win out, and they're still in the mix there. But coming up next, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the game against Florida State, plus why the Seminole defense is their only hope to keep this one close. Today's episode is brought to you by Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments for up to 95% cheaper, and the best part is the process is 100% online, so it's convenient, and there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All right, folks, we're going to get back on the saddle here. We are going to look at Thursday Night Football between the Bengals and the Ravens. Right now, the Ravens are favored by 6. Do I want to take another favorite again? I've been burned by that in the past. You know what? I'm going to take the Bengals to cover this. I don't know if they're going to win outright, but they are pretty desperate right now. They need a win. If they don't get it, I do think they end up covering. +6 is a lot of points that they're giving Cincinnati, so I'm going to ride with the Bengals on this one. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's shift gears now and talk about Notre Dame's upcoming game against Florida State. And before we dive into the specifics, I want to make it clear that if Notre Dame were to lose this game, it would actually be more detrimental than the loss to Northern Illinois. Probably wouldn't be as embarrassing because Northern Illinois and Florida State, two obviously very different programs. It's not going to have quite the same sting to it. But when you look at this Florida State team, they are bad. But when Notre Dame hosts Florida State, kickoff is set for 7:30 p.m. Eastern inside Notre Dame Stadium. It is actually the penultimate true home game of the season. I can't believe we're already close to the end. It's crazy that we've already come this far. The game will air on NBC with Dan Hicks and Jason Garrett. And the weather is looking a little dicey in this one. There's a high of 61 during the day, but the temps are going to drop to the high 40s by game time, and there is a 70% chance of rain according to the Weather Channel that could amount to 1/4 inch. I was at the Louisville game this year. I think it's probably going to be similar. I don't know if it's going to be like a straight-up downpour, but it's going to be misty, it's going to be wet, and it could impact the game as it did with the Louisville game. Florida State leads the all-time series 6-5, but they have lost the last 3 meetings. They actually last played each other in 2021 in that season opener. Notre Dame won that game 41-38, courtesy of a game-winning field goal by Jonathan Dorr, and Florida State's last win, I don't have to tell you about it. It was 2014 in that game where Notre Dame absolutely got robbed in Tallahassee. But we're not going to spend too much time on that today. We're going to talk about this Florida State team, and they're coached by Mike Norvell, who is in his 5th year at Florida State. The Norvell era had a slow start. They were 8-13 in his first 2 years. One of them was the COVID year, so it's hard to evaluate them too much, especially considering that was his first season at the helm. But then they went 23-4 in a 2-year span from 2022 through 2023, and he is now 1-8 this season, fresh off a big ol' raise and a big ol' extension, because there was a point in time, believe it or not, when Alabama was down to Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell to replace Nick Saban. They ended up going with Kalen DeBoer to replace Saban, but Norvell was in it, and because of Norvell's interest in that job and Alabama's interest in him and the fact that Florida State was just coming off an undefeated regular season when they could have made the college football playoff and arguably should have made the college football playoff, Florida State was willing to shell a lot of money to him to keep him around. And I wonder how they're feeling about that decision today, because they were ranked in the top 10 in the preseason, but as I said, they were 1-8 on the year, and their only win was a 14-9 barn burner against Cal. And to be honest with you, that is pretty surprising that they beat Cal, because Cal is actually a decent team. I personally don't think they can fire Norvell after this year. There is just way too much money invested in him at this point in time, but he's going to have to fire all of his assistants. It's going to have to be like Notre Dame after 2016 when Brian Kelly, who was a very loyal coach, had to clean house, because if you're not going to fire that coach after a season like this, you're going to have to fire pretty much everyone else, and I think that is what is going to happen for Mike Norvell, and you wonder how that affects the coaching staff and their preparation for Notre Dame and really every other game in November when they know that they're probably not going to be around that much longer. Right now, Notre Dame is favored by 25.5 points on FanDuel, and the over-under is at 42.5. So Vegas is projecting something in the range of a 34-7 win for the Irish. And when we get into the scouting report, I want to start with the Florida State defense, because if Florida State is going to make this a game, it is because of their defense. Their defense was elite last year, but they lost a ton of guys to the NFL, and they really had to reload at a bunch of key positions. They were able to get some good players in the transfer portal, but just not quite as many good players as they probably hoped. They actually came in at the number 7 transfer portal class, according to 24/7 Sports, but I think as more time has gone by and we have more off seasons with the transfer portal, we can kind of see that the transfer portal rankings, they can be a little bit skewed because some teams are taking more transfers than others. And then you have a team like Ohio State who really just need to fill some gaps, and they have done a great job at doing it, even though that their transfer portal class isn't as high as some of the other ones out there. But when you look at this Florida State defense, their front seven can be disruptive. They have 22 sacks on the year, which is 23rd nationally, and they have 56 total tackles for loss. Number 11, Patrick Payton. He is a good edge rusher. He leads the team with 4 sacks this year, has 8 total TFLs, and he had way bigger numbers last year, 44 pressures and 14.5 tackles for loss last season. But I think his stats have taken a bit of a dip this year, because last year he was playing on a defensive line with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, 2 guys who are already good players in the NFL. And now I think teams look at the Florida State defensive line. They're like, okay, we don't have to worry about guys like that. They just really have to focus on Patrick Payton, and his numbers have been hurt as a result. But he's still having a really good season. Number 6, Darrell Jackson Jr. is another good player up the middle. On the interior of that defensive line, he was a transfer from Miami. He was actually on Bruce Feldman's freaks list going into this season, and he is second on the team in sacks with 3.5. Also has a pass breakup. Number 7, Marvin Jones Jr. He was a player that Florida State was really high on when they got him from Georgia. He has 3 sacks, 4.5 tackles for the loss this year, and he also has a forced fumble. And then in the back end of that defense, they've got number 1, Shaheem Brown. He is a really good safety. He leads the team in tackles with 61. The next closest to him is 41, so there's a 20 tackle difference between the leading tackler and the person who is second on the team, and it is never a good sign when your safety is leading the team in tackles, especially by such a wide margin, because that means whoever has the ball is already past the defensive line and the linebackers as well. But Brown is also very good as a blitzer. He's basically like a linebacker the way that they use him. He plays in the box a lot, but still, he's a guy who's kind of all over the ball, but more often than not, guys have already made some progress before he's able to get a hold of them. Their quarterbacks are pretty good. They run some press man, so Notre Dame's wide receivers are going to have to get some separation from some pretty good athletes. They've got some dudes for sure. But the problem with this Florida State defense, and it's really not their fault at all, is that they're on the field all the time because the offense just cannot stay on the field. And if you're on the field long enough and teams get enough chances, they're going to put up points. That's just the way that this works. And because of that, the Florida State defensive stats, they're not that great. They give up 27 points per game. That's 86th in the country, and they're allowing 5.7 yards per play. And look, they're decent against the pass, but teams have gashed them on the ground. Part of that is because these teams get leads and they start running the ball to run out the clock. So context is important when you look at all these numbers, but they are 115th in rush yards allowed per game. Teams have averaged 4.6 yards per attempt when they're running the ball on them. And the thing that is most shocking to me is that considering they have all these dudes who can create some havoc back there, this Florida State defense has only forced 3 turnovers all season long. 3 in 11 games. That's second to last in the entire country. And the question I have about this group going into this game is like, what is their effort going to be like? Because they've got some talented players, sure, but they're 1-8 on the year. They're so close to the end of the season. A lot of these guys probably already have one foot out the door, whether it's to go to another school in the transfer portal or to enter their name into the NFL draft. So how locked in are they going to be? How cohesive are they going to be as a unit? I'm not really sure, but that does lead me to my keys for the Notre Dame offense. And number 1 is break them. If effort is a question going into the game, imagine what that effort is going to be like if they're down 14-0 early on. Notre Dame has to come out They've got to get points on the board right away, because if they do that, I honestly think this defense is going to fold. They're going to put up a fight early. I think they're going to realize it's a primetime game, and they're going to see Notre Dame. And unless it's like 2018 when the weather was just so bad that Florida State decided to basically quit the game before it even started, when they saw Notre Dame skill guys come out on the field without their shirts on when it was like sub 20 degrees and there was snow on the field, and Florida State players were like, we don't want to have anything to do with this game. So they basically tapped out. Maybe they do that in this game because it's going to be cold, wet, and rainy. But either way, if Notre Dame comes out and they start putting points on the board early and they're aggressive and they're moving the ball down the field, I really do think that this defense is going to fold, and the Irish should be able to run the ball against them. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Riley Leonard are going to have their opportunities. And keep an eye out for Riley Leonard in the scramble game, because Florida State likes to run man coverage, like I said, and they're going to try to get after the passer a little bit with their front seven. But if Riley Leonard could avoid a sack, or the offensive line is able to hold up there, and they bring guys and they don't get home, look out for a Riley Leonard big scramble run, because the defensive backs are going to have their back turned, and they're not very disciplined to begin with, and they don't take the best angles. Plus, Riley Leonard is really hard to bring down. It would not shock me at all if Riley Leonard broke off a big scramble run for a touchdown, or maybe even if it's a designed run and they just catch the defense on their back foot there. I could really see that. I'd also like to see Notre Dame get their receivers more involved, and this has less to do with like a key going against a Florida State defense. It more so just has to do with the Notre Dame offense in general, because they made significant strides in the passing game after the first bye week when they played Stanford. I'd like to see them do that again against the Seminoles now that they're coming off their second bye week of the season. And like I said, the receivers are going to be challenged, but if they can get separation against this group, that bodes well for the offense the rest of the way. We have watched this offense steadily improve ever since the Northern Illinois game, and they're finally at a point where you feel pretty confident throwing the ball and running the ball as well. So if they can continue to put it all together and they get some yards through the air on this defense, I'll feel much better about this offense going forward. But for all the good things Florida State has on defense, they basically have nothing going for them on offense. More on that, plus my prediction right after this. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to take ZBiotics, your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1. Drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. And then step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guaranteed, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode is presented by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I'd love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There are a lot of great sporting events going on right now. There's a lot of great concerts. There's so much to do, so get off your couch and get in the game with Gametime. And my favorite thing about the app, though, personally, is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Just take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time. If you want to know why Florida State is 1-8 on the year, just look at that offense, because there is no sugarcoating it. Florida State has the worst offense in the entire country. So for context, there are 134 teams in the FBS. This Florida State offense is ranked 130th out of 134 or worse in the following categories: points per game, in which they are second to last; yards per game, yards per play; rush yards per game, yards per rush; passer rating; and third down offense. They are in the bottom 5 in the entire country in each one of those metrics. Furthermore, they are outside of the top 100 schools in pass yards per game, yards per attempt, sacks allowed, and turnovers allowed. So there is nothing good about this offense. There is nothing average about this offense other than their red zone offense, but the problem is they don't ever get to the red zone. So in fairness to them, they have dealt with a rash of injuries. They did lose two of their starting running backs, Roydell Williams and then Jalen Lucas, plus their offensive line has just been all over the place. They've gotten really beaten up as well. In 9 games, Florida State has started 8 different combinations on the offensive line, and that is just not a recipe for success. At this point, I'm not even sure who is going to be the quarterback for Florida State in this game. I don't think it really matters. We do know that it's not going to be DJ Uiagalelei, so unfortunately, fans are going to have to miss out on the trilogy in the DJ Uiagalelei era inside Notre Dame Stadium. It's still just so shocking to me that the player who, as a true freshman, went into Notre Dame Stadium in 2020 against a Clark Lee defense that had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Kyle Hamilton and Nick McLeod and all kinds of other good players, went in there and tore that defense apart, set the record for most yards in that stadium by an opposing team's quarterback. He was there, and then now this is where we're at in the DJU era. It wasn't much better in his second time around at Notre Dame Stadium with Clemson, but the fact that it went from that in 2020 to this where we're at now, and it seems like he might be taking a medical redshirt so he can play one more year of college football. Hey, good on you, man. I know some people are going to make fun of him, but it's like, look, he can get paid to play football. Probably not at a Power 4 school after what he did for Florida State at the start of this year, but he can probably make some money elsewhere, and he's certainly not going to be making any money in the NFL. So who knows what he's going to do next, but as for who Florida State is actually going to be playing in this game, I think it could be Brock Glenn. He got the majority of the reps in their last game against North Carolina, but then Luke Kromenhoek got some reps as well. Then he threw 2 picks in that game, so I don't really know what they're going to do. The 2 players that could pose some sort of a threat, their leading rusher, running back Lawrence Toafil, he's pretty good. They've got a good wide receiver on the outside, Ja'Kai Douglas. He's their leading receiver, but if Notre Dame is able to contain those guys, they just aren't going to score. So the keys for Notre Dame's defense, number 1, just prevent the fluke plays. Because when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, the only touchdown that the Huskies offense scored in that game was a fluke play. Now, I'm not saying that the entire game was a fluke because they won in the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, but I think we can be honest about it, right? Like Miami, Ohio head coach Chuck Martin called it a Christmas miracle when that quarterback just kind of flung the ball in there on 3rd down and it somehow got between Kingston Bleamuasa and then Benjamin Morrison, and then there just happened to be no one on Notre Dame behind him, and then he took off for an 80-yard touchdown reception. So as long as they can avoid those plays, this defense is going to be more than fine. Maybe Florida State tries to run some like crazy trick plays or something like that, and then just hope to God they find someone with a white jersey on in the end zone. But if it happens once, okay. If it happens twice, then all of a sudden it could be a little bit dicey. But I just don't really see that happening because my second key to the game for the Notre Dame defense is to show up. That's it. Show up on the field, be ready to go. If they do that, they're going to be able to punish this team, and nothing else is really going to matter because whoever Florida State has out there, it's going to be either a redshirt freshman quarterback or a true freshman quarterback going up against an Al Golden-led defense after a bye week. Whoever is back there is going to be so confused pre-snap with all the different looks and exotic things that Al Golden likes to do with his front 7 and even his secondary as well. They're going to be confused pre-snap, and they're going to be confused post-snap too. And even if they get it all right, if they get the checks right, audibles, all that stuff, their offensive line just isn't good enough to block this Notre Dame front 7, especially when they blitz with their just athletic linebackers. It just is not going to be a really fun time for this Florida State offense. If Florida State has any advantage in this game, and I'm being serious, it's an advantage. It's on special teams because, funny enough, the Florida State special teams are actually really good. Their kicker, Ryan Fitzgerald, is one of the best in the country. He's a perfect 10 of 10 on field goal attempts on the year, including a whopping 5 of 5 from 50+. He has a long of 59 yards this year. So if they're able to get in field goal range, odds are Ryan Fitzgerald is knocking it in. Their punter is also really good. Alex Mastromano, I believe is his name. He's an Australian punter as well. A little bit better than James Nardell for Notre Dame. Alex is averaging nearly 50 yards per punt, and he gets a lot of work because that Florida State offense is so bad. And they've also blocked 5 field goals this year, and they have returned a kickoff for a touchdown. And look, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little bit concerned about Notre Dame's special teams, especially considering there's going to be some rain involved in this one. We saw what happened on that opening kick against Louisville. Devin Ford just let the ball out on the opening kick, and it just basically gifted Louisville a touchdown right to start off the game. Also, you have to consider Notre Dame starting kicker Mitch Jeter is listed as questionable yet again. So Florida State is going to have to take advantage in the third phase of the game, but ultimately I just don't really think it's going to matter, and that leads me to my predictions. I like Notre Dame 45-3 in this one. I think Notre Dame is going to get a lead early. Florida State is going to put up somewhat of a fight, and then the Irish are going to pull away in the second half. And whether Marcus Finn wants to admit it or not, I do think that they're going to try to get style points in this one. It probably shouldn't matter, but I think we all know that it does. I mean, look what IU is doing to teams week to week. Like, I think they should probably be ranked higher because they are just absolutely killing teams. And I think Notre Dame is going to have to really put it on Florida State to make this win look that impressive, because everyone understands that, like, Florida State isn't really that good. It's not Notre Dame's fault. They were really counting on this game being a boost to their strength of schedule at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, it's not, but you can kind of make up for that by just lighting up the scoreboard. Plus, it's a night game. Notre Dame's going to have a bunch of recruits in town, so I think it's just going to make a better experience for everyone if they go out there and light it up. So I got the Irish winning 45-3. I just don't think this Florida State offense is going to be able to score a touchdown, and I think that Notre Dame is going to create some turnovers as well, give the offense some good field position, and they are going to win this one going away. That is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we're going to have recruiting analyst Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated back on the show to tell us everything we need to know about Notre Dame's enormous recruiting weekend ahead. Plus, you got early signing day, just a month away, so a lot of stuff going on the recruiting trail. Then on Friday, we're going to be doing another mailbag, so get those questions in. As always, you can submit yours in the YouTube comments, or you can send them to me on X at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.